There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, "He who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men." Now this can seem like a Zen-type paradox aimed at disrupting our ordinary thought process to give us a flash of insight beyond our normal, logical way of thinking. But it's not, and apparently it can be understood with a non-dual interpretation. We can understand the second part of that verse easily, of action in inaction, when we think about our normal hectic lives. We always seem to be doing something. There's such a thing as active rest or active recovery. Even in so-called inactivity, our minds may be racing, worrying, analyzing, imagining, and planning. But to see inaction in action, that's more cryptic and seems to be pointing at a spiritual truth. Maybe some sort of equanimity or calm mindset in the midst of frantic action. Or is it referring to something deeper? What does it really mean to see inaction in action? Non-dual or not two refers to a single, absolute reality beyond the normal subject and object split we make in our ordinary thinking, meaning my sense of a self as a separate subject of all of my relatively objective experiences. These objects of experiences include all perceptions of outside objects, including the world, others, and my own body, but even my inner world of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. They're all objects of my attention, and according to the non-dual understanding, the ultimate nature of reality of who we really are is prior to that subject and object bifurcation. It's a reality beyond dualistic thinking, perceiving, and yes, acting. I'm here in Austin on a quick work trip where I'm assuming there will be a lot of activity. So it's a good time to see if I can notice this inaction in action. Nope, just noticing action. Action here, action there, more action. All just action. Maybe this comes close. Or I could meditate. But even in meditation, my mind may be running free with thought while I try to quiet and focus it. Oh, the AC feels so good. It's hot here, and I hate it. I'm so used to our temperate, perfect weather in LA. Even though I'm from New York, I'm not used to this 105-degree weather. And this type of aversion to the heat, criticism of it, and attraction to the cool room is a great example of our ordinary dualistic way of thinking. And I'm aware of the awareness behind it, of the non-dual awareness that's open and empty of all dualistic thoughts, distinctions, and criticisms, the silent witness of them all. The pure subjectivity, the I am before it's qualified by I am hot or I am trying to cool down right now. But I still don't naturally see it the way the wise man of our quote does. On the plane, I just finished reading this book by David R. Loy, Nonduality and Buddhism and Beyond, and I got the point. He elucidates and summarizes the vast history of non-dual philosophy in the three great traditions of Daoism, Buddhism, and Advaita Vedanta. He argues that they may all be pointing at the exact same reality, even though each calls it something different. The Tao in Daoism, emptiness in Buddhism, and pure consciousness in Advaita. They may each have different emphasis and description of a non-dual reality that may be phenomenally experienced the exact same way. Seeing inaction in action may be an example of that type of experience. But does that mean there's such a thing as inactive action, some sort of non-dual action? Not just noticing the non-dual reality behind action, but actual non-dual action itself. The Chinese have the concept of wu-wei from Daoism. It means action of non-action. But what would that be exactly? Does it mean just action unfettered by too much thinking or self-consciousness? Of being in a flow state, familiar to athletes, where reactions are automatic and spontaneous? In the book, David describes wu-wei as non-dual action, without the subject-object split. It's action without our normal thinking of ourselves as a subject to achieve some objective. It's action unhindered by thoughts and intentions, without thinking about gaining any particular result. It's without even a sense of personal agent doing anything. Basically, one becomes the action where there is no self-consciousness to observe the action objectively. As he writes, non-dual action has just been defined as action in which there is no awareness by an agent, the subject that is usually believed to do the action, of being distinct from an objective action that is done. Speaking of inaction, I've got to go. I'm about to do some sightseeing activity, and let's see if I can forget my sense of a miserable self in this scorching heat. In Advaita Vedanta, seeing inaction is the perspective of the enlightened person, who realizes the unchanging, infinite consciousness behind the apparent but illusory changing world of action. Nothing ever really happens, changes, or comes into and out of existence. It just appears to. But underlying all the diversity of apparent action, there's a stillness of that single reality that doesn't change because it doesn't need to. It's complete and perfect as it is already. Because it's all there is, it's the source of everything that does apparently happen. And from our relative perspective, we conceptualize this as infinite, the totality of everything possible. But how do we notice this infinite, unchanging, inactive reality? To see inaction in action, to realize the absolute reality while being bogged down by all the frenzied action of our daily lives. I couldn't do it, no matter how inactive I was. The heat was just too much. I got changed and I'm in the office now. David's non-duality book has a chapter each on non-dual thinking, non-dual perception, and non-dual action. But is non-dual experience an oxymoron? How can we think, perceive, or act without a sense of self thinking about, perceiving, or acting on separate objects of attention? At least this wouldn't be our ordinary way of thinking and acting. Maybe the best we can do is to think and act from a felt understanding of the non-dual reality, thinking and acting more consistently and in alignment with this understanding. That would mean subduing the ego, seeing past the illusion of it to allow for more selfless thoughts and actions. And that's where spiritual practice fits in. But some spiritual teachers like Rupert Spira focus just on the understanding of the non-dual reality through self-inquiry. He writes, "It is only when the apparently separate self, or finite mind, dives deep within itself that it finds the rest, the peace, and the fulfillment for which it longs." His teachings are about having a felt understanding that we are not these separate and limited minds and bodies, and then acting as an expression of this single ultimate reality that unifies us. These spiritual teachings argue that we would still be compelled to act, but not from a place of guardedness, insecurity, and self-interest that comes from protecting and enhancing a separate and limited self, but rather from a place of peace and love that comes from realizing our underlying oneness. And the action that results will be a natural harmony with everyone and everything else. And that seems like a good place for us to inactively arrive at. Like and comment if it's resonated with you, and subscribe below to follow me on my journey. See you next time.